Bloodborne is quiet. It's highly unlikely that this is one of the first things you'll notice when you step out into the blood-soaked, yet darkly majestic central Yharnam, but as you acclimatize yourself to the world, you'll start to realize that this game very deliberately chooses to surround the player with a stifling silence. Simply put, there is almost no music in any area in Bloodborne outside of the Hunter's Dream, cutscenes, and bosses, and the contrast between the haunting stillness and the raucous, demonic sounds that follow the major prey is enough to make this silence extremely effective, like the epitome of an anxious calm before the storm. Some may say that this leans too strongly into minimalism, and usually I'd agree. I love atmospheric, ambient music in video games, but for the world of Bloodborne, I don't think that anything other than silence could have quite worked in terms of this very specific approach of drawing the player in and unsettling them. I recently replayed the game, and beforehand I was somewhat worried that the lack of music may detract from the experience. But in actuality, it all felt so spookily natural that I hardly noticed and almost had to remind myself afterwards that there isn't any. I know the lore of this setting extensively well and consider it to be one of, if not the most rich and interesting foundations for a game, and through things like the Pale Blood Hunt, I've been able to keep things fresh in my mind. But seeing it slowly unfold before me was something else. You see the carriages left abandoned at the side of the road, the citizens barricaded in their houses, the coffins chained up, whether it be to keep those outside from desecrating them or those inside from escaping being anyone's guess. The slowly unraveling hunters not knowing that they are becoming what they hunt. The burnings at the stake, the mutated animals, the architecture evoking feelings of admiration and beauty in equal measure. And this deadly silence accompanies it all, to matter-of-factly and confidently drop you into this chaos and allow the stifling sounds around you to speak for themselves. And that's only the first zone here, as the game and story become progressively more twisted. You are an outsider, with the wheels of history having started turning before you set foot in Yharnam, and even more still to occur in one way or another after you set down the controller. And the game never lets you forget through this almost mundane approach to audio design that regardless of your significant role here, the ink of Yharnam's history is yet to dry. This world is ever-changing, and sometimes things just aren't deeply dramatic. It simply is what it is, and this silence is just as loud as sad, whining strings would be through the twisted shrug it conveys when taking us into this world.
Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. Liberate you from your wild curiosity.
Music, even music that's sorrowful in nature, fills in the gaps and comforts us. But in Bloodborne, you are alone. It's just you and the hunt, in a perpetual dance of death till what seems like the end of time in this horrific world. With inferior sound design, this hush could feel rigid and limiting, but with all of this, it's pure immersion and intentional discomfort, with the echoed footsteps against the cobbled stones of Yharnam feeling like the loudest I've ever heard in a game. And then we go through such a vast, yet somehow seamless shift, with the environment slowly reflecting the expanding story as things become more surreal and twisted. One of my favorite things about Bloodborne is the way it transitions. It starts off as a really well executed but pretty traditional sort of dark and scary Night of the Beast, with the subject matter and tone reflecting it as such, and then it gradually opens up as we're exposed to weirder and weirder concepts and creatures, and eventually we're smack dab in the middle of a bizarre, abstract Lovecraftian terror. The atmosphere is rich throughout the transition from Gothic to Cosmic, and it nails every beat along the way. And one of the things that remains consistent through this is silence. This anxious stillness is always with us, creeping on our shoulder, and we can never escape it. But in many ways, we, or at least I, don't want to. Bloodborne is the most obsessed I've ever been with a game's lore, and I'll never forget how it felt to be exposed to this world for the first time. questioning things and exploring places and concepts, the story clunking into motion and going from familiar to strange.
There, you filthy monstrosity! What good's your immortality now? Try stirring up trouble in this sorry state. All mangled and twisted, with every inside on the outside for all the world to see.
Lovecraftian horror is almost a paradox because it is by nature something that cannot be properly articulated. So putting it into words is reductive, and it doesn't ever capture the true nature of what's being described. But Bloodborne's magic is something that can also not be put into words, so I suppose Bloodborne is Lovecraftian. It's a drop into a nightmare that feels just as ironically real, interesting, and immersive as anything. And to say that this is a masterpiece of layered lore, setting design, imagination, and storytelling is an understatement. Because there is thought everywhere, from the layouts of the streets to the designs of the monsters. The world of Bloodborne is one of those rare things that doesn't feel like it could have been created from humans. It's so transcendent that it feels like it's been dropped from the heavens, or hell. The ailing humanity of Ludwig, the tragedy of Maria and German, the Scourge's source, and the spiraling of the healing church, Master Willem's pursuit, the conflicting feelings around the Great Ones, the grotesque attempts to transcend humanity. I've never seen the draw to desiring immortality or anything close to it, but experiencing it as an onlooker is fascinating as we see these people trying to touch the heavens and flying just too close to the sun. And though it is punctuated by a storm of insane proportions, the hunt ends as it begins, with that oppressive quiet blocking all else out. Though I did mention how reductive the topic was, I questioned in my Elden Ring video about whether I preferred it or Bloodborne. And while I consider both to be masterpieces, the answer is clear to me now. Bloodborne reigns supreme. There are few worlds that I've ever felt as enraptured with, and I really have trouble seeing any FromSoft game, or any piece of media in general, topping it. I've visited this world so many times to entrance myself in that deadly silence, and there are surely many more times to come ahead. Many thanks for watching.